publication. He is currently the chairman of the Millennium Project. It's a worldwide network of future researchers, and he is probably one of the most active futurists in the world right now. He's an inventor of the research method called Future's Wheel, and have written more than 100 different articles and papers regarding the future study. He's probably one of the best known researchers in the field of the future studies, and we are so glad to invite him. As I have met him about 11 years ago, and he is as good as 11 years ago. And
I haven't improved?
As young as, as handsome as.
Yes. So I'm really glad to have him here in the National Assembly. So please give him a warm applause for his speech. So we may talk about 40 minutes
Okay.
or so, and followed by a Q&A session.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, this is what I think I'm going to talk about, but I want to have an agreement with everybody here. If there's a subject or a question that you want to ask, I want you to ask it when you're thinking about it. I would rather answer what you're thinking about than what I'm thinking about, because I already know what I'm thinking about. Right? Okay? So if you're bored, it's your fault. Okay. So what I think I'm going to talk about is a brief introduction to the Millennium Project, strategies to address future and other technology and impacts in economics and work, information warfare, deterrence, collective intelligence systems to support decision making, and then separately, we'll talk about this maybe a little bit more. We are a little bit about collaboration, maybe futures research training, a Korean State of the Future Index, State of the Future Report for Korea's own, how to use the global futures intelligence system in your own work, development of Korea's futures intelligence system, because you may have your own Korean brain, global brain that evolves. The use of the Work Technology 2050 Scenarios and Actions Report, which will be coming out maybe in a week or so, in Korean, by the way. So the Millennium Project was an idea of having a global think tank, but not having them just look at the globe sitting in Seoul or sitting in Tokyo, but having people around the world, decentralized collaboration. So we don't steal your director, we just ask him once in a while to fill out a questionnaire. So we don't mess with your career. So the idea is there are a lot of good people around the world, but you can't steal them. So why not just connect up the brains? So this is the idea of the Millennium Project. So it was put together by UN organizations. It came out of the United Nations University. And you should know this. What is the only UN organ headquartered in Asia? All of Asia.
UN University.
She knows. It's true. UN University is the only. You know, you've got the largest area, the biggest population, biggest future, and you've got one UN agency. Yeah. Now, this is not ready for prime time. I just came from Dubai, where I work with their council on the future on transportation. And we're beginning to think about whether Dubai may want to lobby for a UN agency on mobility. Like we have it for communication, ITU, right? We've got it for international energy, so forth. But we don't have, but since mobility and all the systems of mobility, air, transport, cars, all that sort of stuff, there's standards to be worked out. They're not really there in the world. We do have the aviation, so that's part of it. But I throw this out to keep track of what new UN organs will be created. You may want to have one in Korea, because you've already had a Secretary General, you know, and it's ridiculous to have everything just in Europe and in the United States. no offense against the United States, but you know, you're a larger area over here. Anyway, so by the way, so if you hear discussion in the General Assembly about a World Mobility Organization or something like that, the Ministry of Finance here, and maybe the Foreign Affairs Committee here, I want to say, hey, we're going to have that in Korea. Okay. It was also put together by governments. It was a collaboration between Russia and the United States, believe it or not, the very beginning. And NGOs, foundations, corporations, and universities. The idea is that we want to create a trans institution. Why is a trans institution a big deal? We all know that every category here has its advantages and disadvantages, right? So what happens if you just connected up all the advantages and skip all the disadvantages? Right? Let's say that you wanted to create a trans institution on fighting, say, information warfare. Okay? Who in the private sector is the best? Who wants to play? Who in the universities wants to play? Who in the NGO, et cetera, so that you attract people rather than recruit them. I did not recruit Dr. Park Young-suk. She said, she started off by saying, what about capitals or something like that at the very beginning. But then she got more interested.
Yeah, moving the capital from
Right, that was your first conversation.
Seoul to Sejong.
You still haven't moved it.
Oh, it's 2004. 2000.
Yeah. So now we remember what it was
2003
when we first met. Okay. But the point is, you want to create something that's attractive. So you're attracting people because as management gets more complex, management can't handle everything. If I'm recruiting you, I got to keep inspiring you. I got to keep, rewarding you. But if I don't recruit you, but you say, knock on the door, hey, I want in, so then you have people that are just those that want to play. That saves a lot of management problems right off the bat. Secondly, you don't want to have a whole institution. You don't want to have a whole national university. It's a lot of stuff. But maybe there's one professor that's really brilliant. So you have that one professor involved, not the whole system involved. Anyway, the second thing is that when we do something, if it's the future of relationship between the executive and legislative, we have to come up with things that make sense to the bottom line because business is there. We have to make sense to things of values because the NGOs are there. We have to make sense to knowledge because the universities are there. We have to make sense to UN, international organizations, international sensitivity because the UN or some part is there. And we have to make sense to politics because government is there. Right? So this means that what comes out has been tested by these different institutional orientations, but is tested by those who are seriously interested. Right? It also means that we can act through these organizations. If all goes well, you figure out how to use the Millennium Project and you use us throughout. So this is a new institutional structure because people will say that the institutions are not keeping up with the rate of change. Right? And most people in the whole world will say that. Okay, this is one candidate for a new kind of institutional structure. It has no legal personhood. Where's the lawyer in the group? Did he come? Did I scare him away? Anyway.
He'll be joining us soon.
Yeah, okay. Because right now the Millennium Project is registered as a non-profit organization, so we're an NGO. But we don't act as an NGO. We act as a trans institution. Germany almost put it in their parliament, but unfortunately the Americans stole him away at the University of California. So he was gone. And then I didn't want to start over. But the idea is you got non-profit law, you have profit law, and I'd like to see trans-institutional law. A trans institution would be an institution whose board is made up of a cross-section of these people, but not a majority of anyone. The income comes from all these categories, but not a majority of anyone. The people who do the work are from all these categories, but not a majority of anyone. And the value added, in the sense of an annual report, shows you do value added to UN, to corporations, to and so forth. If you do that, I would say you're a trans institution. That structure, I believe, is extremely efficient. We've been evaluated by the UN university before, and one of their conclusions was, we have no idea how you get all this done on such a small budget. Because we're all over the joint, all kinds of things. But it's an interesting thing. So you could have a trans institution for AIDS, a trans institution for information warfare, trans institution for education. You can have a trans institution for anything. But it's an extremely efficient structure. So I bring this up because I hope that Korea sometime will study that idea and then maybe have trans institution as a new category of organization in Korea. And if you do that, we'll register the Millennium Project here first. Okay, so we have 64 nodes around the world. By a node, we mean a sort of a group of people and institutions that connect the local activities with the global, like what I'm doing right now. Dr. Park says, come here, or you say, come here, and I come here and do some stuff, right? So we connect all of our global stuff through local entities around the world. Those are the nodes. They do their own training programs and translate stuff as the work technology report will be translated into Korean and available to everybody. Now, this is the largest collection of futures methods to explore the future that's ever been put together. The second largest was our version 2.0. And the next largest was our version 1.0. Most people say you do they say, here are the 2 or 3 ways to study the future. We think the future is not that knowable, and so we think there's a lot of different methods that you should consider to use. You use different methods for different things. And I say 37 methods because we have an introduction and a synthesis, so there's really 37 different unique methods. Like scenarios is just one method in there. It's about 1,300 pages, so we don't expect you all to read it. But you can use it's a resource that you can draw from as you need. Then we have an online collective intelligence system that you can play around with. If you go to THE up in the top there, THEMP, you can think of it, the Millennium Project, THEMP, themillenniumproject.org. And now it's a subscription service, but there's the surface of it you can see, even without subscribing. But you guys could actually take out a subscription, and if you do it, by the way, don't give individual accounts, give an IP range. Because if you give an IP range, then everybody can use it all the way through. Otherwise, it's limited just to those things. And then we do the State of the Future report. You got a couple of copies here that you can get from the director at some point. And what we do with the State of the Future report is we update data and we update insights on 15 global challenges like water, energy, and so forth. Then we also put in whatever most recent research we've done that year. So during that year, we did a future terrorism deterrence work technology as well. So we add those studies in each year. And part of this was meant to be a management technique. And if you do a State of the Future report yourself for Korea, our motivation was to force us to improve ourselves. So every report should be superior to the previous one. And that's how we test ourselves. Are we getting better? Are we getting better? Are we getting better? So our statements about water should be better and more useful than the ones of the previous year. So it forces us to continue to improve ourselves. I'm going to take a little pause. The gentleman who invented the mouse and hyperlinking and a few other group collaboration techniques that we all automatically do today, integrating voice and data, is a guy named Doug Engelbart. He unfortunately passed away. He's like a patron saint of Silicon Valley. People even have posters of this guy in his office. He's not as famous as Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, but he's the guy that made a lot of stuff work. Now, he died, unfortunately, a few years ago, but one of his projects he didn't finish yet, so I feel I should take it on around the world, is what he called bootstrapping. You know when you take a boot, you have these 2 loops. So you hold the loops, and you're using the boot to pull the boot up. Right? Now, in a computer, the hard drive uses the hard drive to boot itself up to the short-term memory. Right? That's why you call it booting up, because of this process. That's Doug Engelbart. Now, he wanted to apply that principle to organizations. So the idea would be, you take an organization, it can be your organization here, it can be the assembly, it could be the Blue House, it could be a university, any system, and say, what is our improvement system? Interesting question, right? You've never been asked, what is your improvement system? That alone is a good question to ask yourself. What is your system of improvement? Is it analyzing your budget? Is it a board of directors meeting? What is the system? Is it feedback from the legislature? What is your system for improvement? And then, when you figure that out, how then can I improve the improvement system? So you're booting up. You're using the improvement system to improve the improvement system. And this is how organizations can accelerate, because we use software to improve software. We use hardware to improve hardware. But we don't use improvement systems to improve improvement systems. And this is one of the ways he would like to see organizations to accelerate. Now, I'll give you a quick little example of what that means in practice. The Millennium Project does it ourselves. Part of our improvement system was our annual meeting. Okay, so how do I improve that with online software? Well, what do we do in that meeting? Well, we go discuss priorities and so make decisions about what we're going to do. Okay, so we do a questionnaire, real-time Delphi questionnaire, before the physical meeting. So when people walk in the meeting, all the priorities have been decided. And when they rate them with numbers, they also explain it, so they have text. So people, not only do they know what the priorities are when they walk into the meeting, they also know why they're not getting their priority if they're not getting it. So a lot of the discussion is skipped, so you can get down to like, how do we implement? Okay? So then how do we improve that? Again, so we improve that by the next year. What are the priorities? And what are the tactics to get it done? So then people know the priorities and the tactics to get it done before they move in the meeting. And then who's going to do what? So then how do we improve that again? What are the priorities? What are the tactics? Who's going to do it? And then the next year was all of that, then who's going to fund it and pay for it? So we continually improved our annual meetings efficiency by asking ourselves, how do we improve that each time? So it's an interesting thing to throw out. I just, on behalf of Doug Engelbart, I hope you'll consider figuring out what your improvement system is. Okay, we've done 55 studies. Obviously, I don't expect you to read this, but it's just intended to impress you that we've done a lot of stuff. Okay, and these are our funders. Remember, a trans institution should be funded by a cross-section of players. So here's a cross-section of players. So some strategies to address future and their technologies' impacts on economics and work. There have been a lot of studies on this. We know that the concentration of wealth is increasing. We know that the income gaps are widening. We know that employmentless economic growth seems to be the new norm. We also know that the return on investment in capital and technology is usually better than on labor. Right? Future technologies can replace much of human labor, physical and mental labor. We know this, right? So long-term structural unemployment is a business-as-usual, surprise-free trend forecast. So what do we do about this? So what the Millennium Project did is it first studied everybody else's studies as best we could. And I can tell you a couple of things. One, not one study mentioned synthetic biology. Synthetic biology is not the same thing as gene editing. Gene editing is that you change part of a DNA, but it's still the same species. So you make a rose glow at nighttime, but it's still a rose. You make a coffee bean without caffeine, but it's still a coffee bean. We get rid of your inherited disease tendencies, but you're still a human being. Right? That's gene editing, that's CRISPR-9. Synthetic biology is you sit in front of a computer screen and you match up molecular structures and genetic stuff to have capabilities that you want, like cleaning the plaque in your brain, or vacuuming the office at nighttime, or whatever, with some sort of organism. Synthetic biology could be a bigger deal than the steam engine. But not one study on the future of technology and work and employment mentioned synthetic biology. Most of them were just 5 years, one industry, and one country. They didn't look at the whole global situation. Previous changes of the world did not happen simultaneously. You know, the spread of internet was irregular. The agricultural revolution moving to the industrial age was irregular around the world. The whole species didn't go together. This next thing, we may all be together. So we don't have any precedents out there to judge, and we should look at the whole world, not just a single country on these things. So we made a list of questions that were either not asked in these studies, or in our judgment, was answered badly. An example of answered badly was a lot of these studies never said what to do, but those studies that did say what to do about this generally said do science, technology, mathematics, and engineering education, and not much else. Now by 2050, we expect about a workforce of at least 6 billion people. Out of those 6 billion people, how many people can be employed in science, technology, and engineering? Maybe 1 billion, which is still a lot. But what about the other 5 billion? Right? So that answer we thought was inadequate as a result. So we did a real-time Delphi to ask those questions and take all that information. And then we made some draft scenarios, and we circulated those scenarios and got feedback and criticism and improved the scenarios. And those scenarios exist in that State of the Future report that you have. Each scenario is about 10 pages. The word scenario is badly used in the world. A scenario is a story, first of all. It's not an image of the future, it's a story. An image of the future is a perfectly good thing to do, but it's not the same thing. Scenario is a story that connects a future condition with the present tense, with cause and effect links that illustrate decisions. Why is this important? Because when you write a scenario, you'll get to a point you say, I have no idea what happens next. I never thought about that. That's the value of a scenario. Not simply being robust in 3, 4 different visions of the future. That's better than nothing, but it's superficial. Because the reason the scenarios were invented were to figure out how to prevent thermonuclear war between Moscow and Washington. That's why they were invented. We didn't know enough about thermonuclear war. We knew about conventional wars, but in nuclear war, you can end the whole game. So the reasoning is different. So you learn from history, but it wasn't enough. So we had to write stories about things. Well, I won't go into all the detail. I can if you want to in the question and answer stuff. But now, today, a lot of futurists and others have discovered that writing a scenario is tough. It's a lot easier to say, Korea in 2050 looks like this. Or Korea could look like this. Or Korea could look like that. That's perfectly good. That's alternative views of the future of Korea. That's okay. But the real value is trace it between the present and their cause and effect links. So that as you're writing, other people should say to you, well, how is that possible? Take guaranteed annual income. Everybody's heard about guaranteed annual income? Oh, come on. The rest of you have heard about this too. Yes? No?
소득, 기본소득.
Yes? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Now, has anybody seen a cash flow projection on guaranteed income? No, you haven't, because I haven't written it yet. No, there's none. And I know because I went running around a bunch of countries beating up. For example, I'll do it here. Is there a cash flow projection in Korea about guaranteed income? No. Now, if people want to talk about it, they got to come up with the goods. If you go to a bank and you want a loan, you have to show the bank that you can pay back the loan. What's your cash flow projection? You have so much money coming in, going out, and then through time. It's a cash flow projection. You've got to show how guaranteed income has a cash flow projection that's plausible. When I wrote these scenarios, I got to the point, I don't know. So I stopped writing, and I contacted all these different countries, Finland and Italy and other places. I even had an intern working on it full time, who's now a member of parliament, and he still hasn't got it done yet. But that was important to know. Because then I had to start to figure out, so we added it into the questionnaire. what are the new income sources to make a guaranteed income work? Because if you get to general intelligence, narrow intelligence is what we have today. That's what WINS and AlphaGo. We don't have general intelligence yet, but if we have general intelligence that acts like you call if you do a new problem, you call your friend, you do your Google search, you'll use everything you can get, right? That's what general intelligence does. Narrow intelligence doesn't do it. It stays within its own category. If we have general intelligence by maybe 2030, 2035, that's impact on unemployment is much bigger than narrow intelligence. And it'll be much more of a surprise, because narrow intelligence gives you some warning. You've got some robust driving cars, but they don't happen all at once. So you have some time of preparation. But general intelligence can happen worldwide very fast. And so we worry about that. So we think that guaranteed income might very well be important for the transition if we hit general intelligence. But you got to make it financially sustainable. Otherwise, you're ruining countries. Anyway, so we got all the scenario feedback, we sent the scenarios around, and then we did have workshops done around the world to say, okay, read the scenarios, and then throw them in a trash can, and then think what you should do for your country. So we collected a couple hundred ideas and actions, which many of them were overlaps, of course, similar. So we distilled them down to 93. Then we took those suggestions and sent them out to people to discuss these actions. We divided them up into 5 different categories, because 93 is too much. If I sent you a questionnaire of 93, you would shoot me. So we narrowed it down to different categories. But each of these 93 suggestions of what to do are grouped in these, what government should do, what business should do, what academics should do, and so forth. And it has a page of analysis. So it's not simply saying, teach STEM education. It says, here are things to do, and here's pro and con on these things, because you can implement a good idea in a bad way. Okay. So to make life simpler, we use a term called NT, or new technologies. Because as I said, the other studies didn't include synthetic biology. But I don't want to have to keep saying all the different technologies every time I say something. It's too complex. So just like we have ICT refers to hardware, software, communication, all this sort of stuff together. So you don't have to do a whole laundry list of words. You say ICT and people know what you're talking about. So we're hoping that NT would be a way. So NT refers to all these different technologies. And the synergies among them. Because the important part is the synergies among them, One of the ways that economists tell us that you make wealth is you put 2 or more things in new combinations that people want. Okay, so then look at how all these things can cross-impact and affect each other, because they will. So the 3 scenarios, the first one is complicated and mixed bag. This one is, again, like the other ones, about 10 pages. Now there's a lot of change out to 2050. So business as usual or surprise-free doesn't mean that there's no change, because you take the rate of change as it is, and you throw in this already accelerating, so the acceleration of the acceleration of the acceleration is business as usual. Right? People sometimes get confused. It means, well, nothing changes. Well, if nothing changes in the decision-making system, there's still a lot of change coming up. So you have good decisions and you have dumb decisions. So as a result, imagine all this sort of stuff being extremely complex. It works in some places, it doesn't work in other places. There's conflicts. We're living in a virtual reality, an artificial reality almost all the time. So a lot of these advances that you're hearing about become normalized in civilization, but for both good and for bad, both ways. The second one, the polarization that we experience in the world today. If you like this thing, then the social media reinforces it. So you're starting to live in your own little bubble. So as more and more people start to live in their own little bubble, and information warfare makes them start to hate each other in their little bubbles, then you can't get decisions made across the system. Now, most of the serious stuff in the world, air, water, energy, are global systems, global decisions. And you can't get global decisions made if everybody's in their own little category and hating each other at the same time, right? So who fills the gap? Organized crime. Organized crime can buy the best software talent the world's got. They'll get involved in artificial intelligence. They're not going to be sitting on the sidelines. Organized crime makes twice as much money as all the military budgets in the world put together. All the military budgets on an annual basis is about $1.6, $1.7 trillion. Organized crime, by our estimate and others, is about $3 to $4 trillion a year. Furthermore, they don't have to go through the National Assembly to get permission. So they have more flexibility, they have more money, and they have more flexibility. And they can buy the best talent because they got the money. They can also set up dummy corporations. So you might be working on a new firewall protection system, not realizing you're working for organized crime. Because a lot of times, even in my country, boards of directors don't have to be identified. There's a bill in my Congress to get that changed, and it's been stopped for year after year after year. So yes, you can have a series of dummy corporations, and you can't trace back too easily. So organized crime is a deadly serious issue, not being taken seriously enough, in my judgment, on a global basis. We all have stuff internal to our countries, but we need a global strategy to address organized crime.
Does organized crime include IS terrorist group as well?
Well, that's good. Good for you. Terrorism, there's a book, I forgot, but some military guy wrote this. It was published about 2 or so years ago, that terrorism used to be over here, organized crime used to be over here. There's a little overlap, but that overlap is growing. It's also growing with governments, because let's say, is this not being recorded, correct? Okay.
Maybe except horrors.
You want me to turn it off?
Just for a second.
Okay.